What if I told you that one Golden Age actress was so wealthy she could have bought MGM, Paramount, and Warner Brothers, and still had billions left over? The real wealth belonged to stars you'd never suspect. And the number one entry will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking billions, not millions. Actual billions. But first, let me tell you about a glamour queen whose business genius revolutionized celebrity marketing. Elizabeth Taylor, $800 million today. Elizabeth Taylor didn't just have violet eyes. She had a golden touch for business. This woman became the first actress to earn $1 million for a single film, then turned that fame into a billion-dollar fragrance empire. That $1 million Cleopatra salary in 1963, that was revolutionary. Elizabeth broke the salary barrier for all actors, male and female. But the real money came from what she did after the cameras stopped rolling. In the 1980s, Elizabeth co-founded a perfume line that became a global phenomenon. White diamonds alone generated over $1 billion in sales during her lifetime. Think about that. A billion with a B. She wasn't just putting her name on products. She was actively involved in creating fragrances that captured her glamorous persona. But Elizabeth's real treasure was her jewelry collection. The 33-carat Krupp diamond, the 69-carat Taylor Burton diamond. These weren't just accessories. They were investments. Richard Burton knew exactly what he was doing when he bought Elizabeth those diamonds. When Christie's auctioned her jewelry collection in 2011, it brought in $116.8 million, a record for a private jewelry sale. That single auction underscored Elizabeth's status as a connoisseur of luxury and a shrewd collector of appreciating assets. Her real estate portfolio included properties in Beverly Hills, Switzerland, and around the world. Elizabeth understood that luxury real estate was both lifestyle and investment. As one of the first true global celebrities, Elizabeth leveraged her fame into a powerful personal brand decades before personal branding became a business term. Every appearance, every endorsement, every business opportunity was carefully managed. When Elizabeth passed away in 2011, her estate was worth $600 million, about $800 million today. The woman with violet eyes had seen golden opportunities everywhere and seized every single one. But Elizabeth's business empire was nothing compared to our next comedy genius who revolutionized how entertainers could control their own destiny. Charlie Chaplin, $400 million today. Charlie Chaplin didn't just make people laugh. He made sure he got paid for every single chuckle. This little tramp was actually a financial giant who understood business better than most studio executives. In the 1910s, Chaplin became one of the first actors to command astronomical salaries. His 1916 contract with Mutual Film Corporation was worth $670,000 annually, a record-breaking sum that made headlines worldwide. By 1918, he negotiated a $1 million contract with First National Pictures, cementing his position as the highest-paid entertainer on Earth. But here's what made Chaplin truly wealthy. He retained ownership of his films. While other actors made movies for studios and got their paychecks, Chaplin owned his masterpieces. The Kid, City Lights, Modern Times, The Great Dictator. Every time these films made money, Chaplin made money. Think about that business model. Chaplin's films are still generating revenue today, nearly a century after he made them. That's the power of ownership, royalties that last forever. Chaplin also co-founded United Artists with Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith. As one studio executive said at the time, the inmates have taken over the asylum. But those inmates created a distribution company that gave them unprecedented control over their work and profits. His investments extended beyond films into real estate and other ventures. That Swiss mansion where he spent his later years? Just one property in a diverse portfolio that grew for decades. When Chaplin passed away in 1977, his estate was worth $100 million, over $400 million today. The little tramp had built an empire that most business tycoons would envy. But even Chaplin's revolutionary approach to entertainment business pales next to our next singing cowboy, who turned westerns into a media empire. Gene Autry, $580 million today. Gene Autry wasn't just the singing cowboy. He was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in American history. While other actors were content being employees, Gene built a media empire that most Fortune 500 companies would envy. More than 600 recorded songs, including classics like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Back in the Saddle Again. Nearly 100 films, multiple television series. But that was just Gene's day job. His real genius was understanding that entertainment could be leveraged into much bigger business opportunities. Gene owned several radio and television stations, including KTLA in Los Angeles, which became incredibly valuable as television exploded in popularity. He wasn't just appearing on TV, he was owning the stations that broadcast it. But here's the kicker. Gene owned the Los Angeles Angels baseball team from its founding in 1961 until his passing. Think about that. He literally owned a Major League Baseball franchise. The team's value grew exponentially over the decades, making Gene tens of millions from that single investment. Gene was also one of the first entertainers to capitalize on merchandising. His name and image were used on toys, records, guitars, clothing, creating revenue streams that had nothing to do with his performances, but everything to do with his brand. His real estate investments included hotels in Palm Springs and properties across California. Gene understood that diversification was the key to lasting wealth. Known for his discipline and business acumen, Gene reinvested his earnings into ventures that provided long-term financial security rather than short-term gratification. When Gene passed away in 1998, his net worth was $320 million. That's $580 million today. The singing cowboy had literally bought himself a baseball team and built a media empire. Now that's what I call riding into the sunset in style. But Gene's diversified empire was nothing compared to our next silent film pioneer, who literally invented the modern entertainment business model. Mary Pickford, $800 million today. Mary Pickford was America's sweetheart, but she was also America's first entertainment mogul. This woman didn't just star in movies, she literally invented the modern film industry's business model. By the late 1910s, Mary was earning $10,000 per week, an astronomical sum that made her one of the highest paid people in America, not just Hollywood. Her 1918 contract with First National Pictures included a $1 million bonus. $1 million in 1918. But Mary's real genius was co-founding United Artists with Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith. They called it the asylum taken over by the inmates. But those inmates created the template for artist-owned production companies that still exists today. Through United Artists, Mary controlled her films from production to distribution, ensuring she received a share of profits rather than just a salary. This revolutionary approach made her incredibly wealthy, while giving her creative control no studio employee could ever have. Her films, Pollyanna, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, The Poor Little Rich Girl, were massive box office hits worldwide. Mary wasn't just popular in America. She was a global phenomenon generating revenue from every corner of the earth. Pickford, the estate she shared with Douglas Fairbanks, became a symbol of Hollywood glamour. While it cost millions to build and maintain, it also solidified their status as Hollywood royalty and appreciated massively over time. Mary's investments extended beyond films into cosmetics, real estate developments, and various ventures that diversified her wealth beyond entertainment. At her peak, Mary's net worth was estimated at $40 million. That's over $800 million today. She was one of the first actors to become a millionaire, a feat nearly unheard of in the early 20th century. When Mary passed away in 1979, her fortune had diminished to about $50 million due to philanthropic efforts and changing times. But her legacy as the woman who taught Hollywood how to really make money remains intact. Speaking of revolutionary business models, our next family man built an empire through strategic contracts and California real estate, Fred MacMurray. $322 million today. Fred MacMurray seemed like the most ordinary guy in Hollywood. Dependable father figure in My Three Sons. Steady leading man in dozens of films. But this ordinary guy quietly built one of entertainment's most extraordinary fortunes. Over 100 films across 4 decades, from film noir classics like Double Indemnity to Disney family comedies like The Absent-Minded Professor. Fred was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood during his peak years, commanding substantial salaries when most actors were studio employees. But Fred's real genius was My Three Sons. That TV show ran for 12 seasons, and Fred negotiated a deal that included lucrative residuals. For decades after the show ended, Fred was still collecting checks from syndication worldwide. His association with Disney was particularly profitable. The Shaggy Dog, The Absent-Minded Professor. These family films generated massive profits, and Fred's contracts ensured he shared in those profits. But here's what made Fred truly wealthy. That 1,750-acre ranch in Sonoma County, California. This wasn't just a home, it was a working cattle ranch that generated income while appreciating dramatically in value. California ranch land became some of the most expensive property in America, and Fred owned nearly 2,000 acres of it. Despite his wealth, Fred was known for his modesty and careful money management. He lived well, but not extravagantly, ensuring his fortune grew steadily throughout his lifetime. When Fred passed away in 1991, his estate was worth $150 million. That's $322 million today. The ordinary family man had achieved extraordinary financial success through discipline, smart contracts, and strategic real estate investment. And speaking of strategic real estate, our next Western Stars investment portfolio would make Wall Street jealous. Randolph Scott, $260 million today. Randolph Scott rode horses on screen and rode the stock market off screen. This cowboy star turned out to be one of Hollywood's most sophisticated investors, building a fortune that most Wall Street titans would envy. Over 100 films, most of them box office hits. Scott was the epitome of the Western hero throughout the 1940s and 50s. Rugged, dependable, the kind of star audiences trusted completely. But while he was playing cowboys, he was thinking like a CEO. Scott worked as an independent actor, negotiating better deals and retaining larger shares of his film's profits. This wasn't common in the studio system era, but Scott understood his worth and demanded accordingly. But here's where Scott really showed his genius. He started investing in the stock market early in his career, building a diverse and high-performing portfolio. While other actors were spending their money as fast as they earned it, Scott was compounding wealth like a professional investor. His Beverly Hills estate and multiple Southern California properties grew massively in value as Los Angeles became one of the world's most desirable real estate markets. Scott wasn't just buying homes, he was making strategic real estate investments. Scott famously shared a close friendship with Cary Grant, and they often made joint investment decisions. Two of Hollywood's smartest financial minds pooling their resources and knowledge. No wonder they both got incredibly wealthy. Despite his fortune, Scott led a relatively modest lifestyle, avoiding the excessive spending that destroyed so many of his peers. He understood that preserving wealth was just as important as creating it. When Scott passed away in 1987, his net worth was $100 million. That's $260 million today. The cowboy, who looked so comfortable on horseback, had been even more comfortable in the boardroom. But Scott's market savvy was nothing compared to our next leading man's incredible business philosophy. Cary Grant, $130 million today. Cary Grant was the definition of sophistication on screen. Off screen, he was one of Hollywood's shrewdest businessmen, turning charm into a fortune that'd make today's A-listers weep with envy. 74 films over 3 decades. North by Northwest, To Catch a Thief, The Philadelphia Story. Classics that are still making money today. But here's what made Grant different. While other stars signed long-term contracts and gave away their power, Grant went independent early and negotiated like a Wall Street titan. Yet beneath his polished exterior lay a man tormented by one of Hollywood's most traumatic childhoods. Born Archibald Leach into crushing poverty in Bristol, England, his world shattered when his father had his mother committed to a mental asylum and told 9-year-old Archie she had passed away. He wouldn't discover his mother was alive until 1938, when he was already a famous actor. His older brother James had passed away in childhood, his father abandoned him to emotionally distant grandparents, and family members were lost in World War II bombing raids. Grant avoided long-term studio contracts, choosing instead to negotiate film-by-film deals. This gave him control over his earnings and career. He demanded, and got, profit-sharing agreements for several films. When North by Northwest made money, Grant made money. For decades, he was famously frugal, managing his finances with precision that would make accountants proud. Invested in stocks, bonds, real estate. The man lived below his means while his investments compounded into serious wealth. The trauma of abandonment followed him through 5 failed marriages. Desperate to heal his psychological wounds, he underwent experimental therapy sessions over 100 times between 1959 and 1966, seeking to remove the difficulties from his soul. Despite worldwide fame, he suffered from crippling self-doubt, feeling he never deserved success. I have spent the greater part of my life fluctuating between Archie Leach and Cary Grant, he confessed, unsure of each, suspecting each. When Grant passed away in 1986, he left behind $60 million. That's $130 million today. Not bad for a kid from Bristol who started with nothing but talent and an unshakable understanding of his own worth. But Grant's self-made millions were nothing compared to our next star's mysterious fortune. Marilyn Monroe, $120 million today, potential. Marilyn Monroe could have been one of Hollywood's wealthiest stars. Instead, she became one of its greatest tragedies, a cautionary tale of how fame without the right support system can destroy even the most valuable careers. Born Norma Jean Mortensen, Monroe's childhood was a revolving door of foster homes and an orphanage while her mentally ill mother was institutionalized. She never knew her father, married at 16 just to escape the system, and spent her entire life searching for the love and stability that wealth could never provide. At her peak, Monroe was commanding substantial salaries and pioneering what we now call celebrity branding. Her image was worth millions, her films were box office gold, and she understood the power of her persona better than almost anyone in Hollywood. But Monroe's neediness and insecurity made her vulnerable to exploitation. Studio executives and husbands controlled her finances while she battled depression and addiction. The very traits that made her magnetic on screen, that vulnerability, that desperate need to be loved, made her easy prey in business. Financial experts have analyzed Monroe's career trajectory and earning potential. Had she lived and continued working, managing her finances properly, and leveraging her brand intelligently, she could have earned the equivalent of $120 million in today's money through films, endorsements, and licensing deals. Think about that. The woman who died reportedly in debt could have been one of the richest entertainers of her generation. Her estate, managed properly after her death, has generated hundreds of millions in licensing revenue, money that could have been hers if she'd had better financial guidance and emotional support. Monroe's story proves something crucial. Talent and marketability mean nothing without the business infrastructure to protect and grow wealth. She had everything except the one thing that could have saved her: people who cared more about her well-being than her earning potential. When Monroe died at 36, she left behind a legacy worth billions to others, but almost nothing for herself. The ultimate symbol of Hollywood glamour had been failed by the very system that made her famous. Speaking of tragic potential, our next star's story shows how even the most beloved entertainers could see their fortunes destroyed by the same industry that created them. Joan Crawford, $75 million today. Joan Crawford didn't just act, she weaponized reinvention. This woman clawed her way from absolute poverty to become one of Hollywood's most feared and wealthy actresses, proving that sometimes survival requires becoming someone completely different. Born Lucille Fay LeSueur, Crawford's childhood was a masterclass in trauma. Her father abandoned the family when she was just 10 months old. Her stepfather began abusing her when she was 11, creating a household so toxic that she fled to boarding school at 13, working as a laborer to pay her own way. But Crawford understood something that destroyed many of her peers. In Hollywood, adaptation wasn't optional, it was survival. She successfully transitioned from silent films to talkies when many careers died. She reinvented herself from flapper to dramatic actress, earning an Academy Award for Mildred Pierce in 1945. Her business acumen extended far beyond acting. After marrying Pepsi Cola CEO Alfred Steele, she served on the company's board for years, leveraging her celebrity status to promote the brand worldwide. This wasn't just a ceremonial position. Crawford understood corporate strategy and used her fame as a business tool. Crawford's investments in real estate and her disciplined approach to contract negotiations built substantial wealth. She commanded top salaries throughout multiple decades by constantly evolving her screen persona. The trauma that shaped her also drove her relentless work ethic. Crawford was famously professional, arriving early, knowing everyone's lines, treating film sets like military operations. This reputation for reliability made her bankable even when other stars were considered risks. When Crawford passed away in 1977, her estate was valued at $50 million, about $75 million today. The woman who started with nothing had built an empire through sheer force of will and an unshakable understanding that in Hollywood, you either evolved or disappeared. But Crawford's hard-earned fortune was nothing compared to our next icon, whose tragic early death cut short what could have been one of Hollywood's greatest business empires. Greta Garbo, $120 million today. Greta Garbo didn't just want to be alone. She wanted to be alone with her money. And by the time she retreated from Hollywood in 1941, she'd accumulated enough wealth to ensure she'd never need to work again. At her peak, Garbo was earning $250,000 per film. That's about $4 million today. During the Great Depression, MGM paid her more than any other actor because she was box office gold worldwide. Her mystique translated into massive profits. But her wealth couldn't protect her from devastating personal losses that shaped her legendary reclusiveness. Born into crushing poverty in Stockholm's slums, she watched helplessly as her father passed away when she was 14, despite taking him to charity clinics for a year of painful treatments. Her beloved sister Alva passed away from illness at age 23 while Greta was in Hollywood. I cannot believe it until I return to my home and find she is not there to greet me. Her mentor, Maurits Stiller, possibly the love of her life, passed away at 45, leaving her utterly alone in America. While other stars spent lavishly, Garbo was incredibly frugal. She invested her earnings wisely: stocks, bonds, real estate. That Manhattan apartment overlooking the East River? It appreciated massively over the decades she lived there. These losses created the melancholy that made her famous, but also triggered lifelong struggles with emotional wellness. I suppose I suffer from very deep sadness, she told a friend in 1971. The trauma of abandonment, her father's passing, her sister's passing, Stiller's passing, made her pathologically afraid of betrayal, of commitment. Studio head Louis B. Mayer had initially called her too heavy for American audiences, forcing her through humiliating changes that stripped away her Swedish heritage. When she retired at 36, it wasn't because her career was over. It was because she was already set for life. For 50 years, she lived quietly in New York while her investments grew and grew and grew. By her passing in 1990, Garbo's estate was worth $55 million, over $120 million today. The woman who wanted to be alone had accomplished something most stars never could: true financial independence. Speaking of independence, our next entertainer built an empire that most CEOs would envy. Grace Kelly, $120 million today. From Hollywood royalty to actual royalty, Grace Kelly lived the ultimate fairy tale. Except fairy tales usually don't involve giving up everything you love for a crown and a fortune. Grace's 11 films made her one of the most sought-after actresses of the 1950s. Academy Award winner for The Country Girl, leading a lady to Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart, earning some of the highest salaries of the era. But when she married Prince Rainier III of Monaco in 1956, she didn't just gain a title. She gained access to a royal fortune beyond imagination. Behind the glamorous image lay a shy, overlooked child who often felt invisible in her accomplished family. Growing up, her siblings garnered most of the attention, while Grace stayed in the background, developing the reserved nature that would later captivate audiences. Her seemingly perfect royal life masked deep sacrifice. She was forced to give up her American citizenship and was banned from returning to Hollywood by her husband, cutting her off from the career that defined her. Her family provided a $2 million dowry for the royal wedding. That's $20 million today. But that was pocket change compared to what she was marrying into. Monaco generated massive revenue from Monte Carlo casino, luxury tourism, and strategic tax haven status. As Princess of Monaco, Grace became part of a financial empire worth hundreds of millions. At her tragic passing in 1982, Grace's personal wealth was $40 million, about $120 million today. But her connection to Monaco's royal assets made her one of the wealthiest women in the world. Her end, at age 52, was as tragic as it was mysterious. While driving with her daughter Stephanie, Grace reportedly cried out in panic, "I can't stop. The brakes don't work. I can't stop," before her car plunged 45 feet off a cliff. The family had to make the agonizing decision to remove her from life support after she was declared brain inactive. Stephanie still cannot drive down that road, saying, "I always ask them to take the other road." But royal money is nothing compared to what our next midpoint shocker accumulated through pure inheritance. Dina Merrill, $5.6 billion today. You probably don't recognize the name Dina Merrill, but what you're about to learn will absolutely shock you. This woman wasn't just wealthy. She was worth more than most countries' entire economies. Born Nadenia Marjorie Hutton in New York City, December 29, 1923. Her father, E.F. Hutton, founder of the legendary Wall Street brokerage firm. Her mother, Marjorie Merriweather Post, heiress to the Post cereal fortune. We're talking about old American money so vast it's hard to comprehend. Dina's mother inherited $250 million in 1914. That's $5 billion in today's money. The Post cereal empire, General Foods Corporation, Birdseye Frozen Foods, this family didn't just own businesses. They owned entire industries that fed America. While Dinah built a respectable acting career with over 100 film and television credits, her entertainment earnings were essentially pocket change compared to her inheritance. This wasn't Hollywood wealth. This was generational, industrial empire wealth. But here's what made Dina remarkable. She could have lived entirely off her inheritance, but she chose to work. She served on boards of major organizations, including the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. She was a dedicated philanthropist and businesswoman who used her wealth to make a difference. When Dina passed away, On May 22, 2017, at age 93, she was worth $5 billion. Let that sink in. $5 billion. She was wealthier than most Fortune 500 CEOs, tech entrepreneurs, and entertainment moguls combined. That's not just Hollywood money. That's buy your own country money. While other stars were worried about their next paycheck, Dina could have bought the studios they worked for without breaking a sweat. The woman you've probably never heard of was the richest person in entertainment history. And she got there not through fame, but through the most powerful force in American wealth: generational inheritance backed by industrial empires. But even with Dina's incredible inheritance, our next socialite proved you could take family money and multiply it brilliantly. Gloria Vanderbilt, $223 million today. Gloria Vanderbilt proved something that Hollywood had never seen before. You could be born into massive wealth and still build your own empire on top of it. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was about turning a famous name into a global brand. As the great-great-granddaughter of railroad magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt, Gloria inherited about $5 million as a child. That's $100 million in today's money. But instead of just living off that trust fund, she revolutionized fashion history. In the 1970s, Gloria did something that seems obvious now, but was revolutionary then. She put her name on designer jeans. The Gloria Vanderbilt jeans, with that signature swan logo, generated millions in revenue and made designer denim a mainstream phenomenon. Beyond jeans, she expanded into home goods, fragrances, and accessories. This wasn't a celebrity slapping their name on products. Gloria was involved in design, marketing, business decisions. She understood that her name was her greatest asset and leveraged it brilliantly. She was also a talented painter and writer, earning additional income through exhibitions and best-selling books. Her autobiography captivated readers with its honest portrayal of American high society. Her Manhattan townhouse and luxury apartment overlooking the East River were worth millions alone. These weren't just homes. They were investments that appreciated dramatically over decades. When Gloria passed away in 2019, her estate was valued at $200 million, about $223 million today. She'd taken her inherited wealth and multiplied it many times over through sheer business brilliance. And speaking of business brilliance, wait until you hear about our next comedian's incredible real estate empire, Bob Hope. $235 million today. Bob Hope wasn't just America's comedian. He was one of America's smartest investors. While other entertainers were buying flashy cars and throwing parties, Bob was quietly building a real estate empire that would make him richer than most movie studios. Nearly 80 years in entertainment, over 70 films, countless TV specials, those USO tours entertaining troops overseas for decades. But Bob understood something most performers didn't. The real money wasn't in performing, it was in owning land. Here's what made Bob a genius. He invested in California real estate long before it became prime property. San Fernando Valley, Palm Springs, areas that seemed like desert wasteland in the 1940s. Bob saw the potential when land was cheap and bought thousands of acres. His Palm Springs estate alone became iconic, symbolizing his success in both entertainment and investment. But that was just one property in a massive portfolio that grew in value for decades. Bob secured long-term sponsorship deals with major brands like Pepsodent, ensuring steady income beyond his performances. He was one of the first entertainers to understand the power of corporate partnerships. His television specials drew huge audiences annually, and he negotiated deals that gave him residuals long after they aired. Bob was making money from performances he'd done decades earlier. Despite his wealth, Bob was famously careful with money, ensuring his finances were managed efficiently throughout his life. He understood that wealth preservation was just as important as wealth creation. When Bob passed away in 2003 at age 100, his estate was worth $150 million. That's $235 million today. The man who made America laugh had quietly become one of America's richest entertainers. But Bob's real estate empire was nothing compared to our next crooner's incredible diversification strategy. Bing Crosby, $200 million today. You know Bing Crosby for White Christmas, but did you know he was also one of Hollywood's most successful businessmen? This crooner didn't just sing his way to fortune. He invested, diversified, and built an empire. 70 feature films, over 1,600 recorded songs, and White Christmas alone is still one of the best-selling singles of all time. But Bing was thinking bigger than just entertainment. While other stars were buying cars and mansions, Bing was buying entire industries. Real estate, he owned vast properties across California. Mining, he had stakes in several operations. Oil wells, Bing understood energy investments decades before they became trendy. Cattle ranches, racehorses, even baseball teams. This man diversified like a Fortune 500 company. He was a pioneer in television, hosting The Bing Crosby Show and producing Christmas specials that became annual traditions. Those residuals kept paying for decades after they aired. But here's the brilliant part. Bing's will specified that his 7 children would inherit his fortune, but the money was placed in a trust until they reached 65. He was protecting his wealth from youthful mistakes while ensuring it would continue growing. When Bing passed away in 1977, his estate was valued at $50 million. That's over $200 million today. The crooner who made America swoon had quietly built one of entertainment's greatest business empires. But even Bing's diversified fortune was nothing compared to our next leading lady who turned scandal into pure gold. Mae West, $22 million today. Mae West once said, "When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better." What she didn't mention? When it came to making money, she was absolutely unstoppable. In the mid-1930s, Mae was the highest paid actress in Hollywood. Not just among women, among everyone. $300,000 per film, plus $100,000 for screenplays she wrote herself. During the Great Depression, that's like making $6 million per movie today. But Mae's path to wealth was built on tragedy and dysfunction most people never knew about. Born into grinding poverty as Mary Jane West, her father, Battlin' Jack, was a street-fighting prizefighter whose marriage to her German immigrant mother was deeply troubled. Dysfunction that would color Mae's lifelong distrust of traditional relationships. Her eldest sister, Katie, passed away in infancy, leaving Mae to shoulder enormous family expectations. When she wrote and starred in her play Sex in 1926, they arrested her for obscenity. 10 days in prison. But Mae understood something other performers didn't. Scandal sells if you control the narrative. She turned that arrest into publicity gold. These traumatic losses created the tough-talking persona that made her famous, but also triggered lifelong struggles with emotional wellness. "I suppose I suffer from very deep sadness," she told a friend in 1971. The trauma of abandonment, her father's emotional unavailability, her sister's early passing, made her pathologically afraid of betrayal, of commitment. Studio head Louis B. Mayer had initially insulted her appearance, forcing her through humiliating changes that stripped away her authentic self. Mae was a businesswoman first, entertainer second. She invested in real estate, maintained complete control over her projects, negotiated profit-sharing deals when other actors were just happy to get a paycheck. When she passed away in 1980, she left behind $10 million. That's about $32 million today. But Mae's self-made fortune pales next to our next star, whose generational wealth bought something money usually can't: complete artistic freedom. Katharine Hepburn, $32 million today. You want to talk about old money? Katharine Hepburn didn't just have wealth. She had the kind of generational fortune that lets you tell Hollywood exactly where to shove it. And she did, repeatedly, for 7 decades. 4 Academy Awards, 7 decades of stardom, the freedom to make movies on her own terms. That's what real wealth bought Katharine Hepburn. And it all started with family money, so old it had cobwebs. Her father, Dr. Thomas Hepburn, was a successful urologist. Her mother was an heiress to the Hepburn family fortune, tied to industrial empires. We're talking about the kind of money that doesn't just buy security, it buys the luxury of being exactly who you are, no matter what anyone thinks. But money couldn't protect the Hepburns from a family tragedy so devastating it shaped Kate forever. At age 13, she discovered her beloved older brother Tom hanging from a noose in their family home, a loss that shattered her world. She used his birthday as her own for 70 years afterward, unable to let him go. What made this even more heartbreaking was that her family suffered from a pattern of tragic losses. Her grandfather, Fred Houghton, great-uncle Charlie Houghton, and uncles Charlie and Dr. Sewell Hepburn all took their own lives. Imagine carrying that weight while building one of Hollywood's most formidable careers. That family wealth gave her something most actors never had: the freedom to grieve, to be difficult, to demand better. When her career hit a rough patch in the 30s, she didn't panic like other stars. She bought the rights to The Philadelphia Story with her own money, bet on herself when Hollywood wouldn't. That's what generational wealth looks like: the ability to make power moves when everyone else is scrambling. Her 26-year secret affair with married Spencer Tracy became both her greatest love and deepest source of pain. Tracy, tormented by guilt over his son and battling severe addiction issues, could never leave his wife. Hepburn sacrificed her own chance at marriage and children to care for him, watching helplessly as his dependencies destroyed his health. She couldn't even attend his funeral out of respect for his family, grieving alone for the man who'd consumed decades of her life. By the time she passed away in 2003, her estate was worth $20 million, about $32 million today. But the real treasure? That 7.17-acre waterfront Connecticut property that had been in the family since 1913. That's not just wealth, that's legacy. Speaking of legacy, wait until you hear about the woman whose tragic childhood nobody talks about, but whose business empire saved her from a lifetime of pain. Gloria Swanson. $20 million today? Picture this. You're 5'1". You've got the world at your feet, but you're hiding a secret so dark that your entire public persona is basically armor against it. That was Gloria Swanson, and somehow she turned that pain into one of old Hollywood's greatest business empires. When I was young, no man my age made enough money to support me in the style expected of me, she once said. When I pass away, my epitaph should read, "She paid the bills." And boy, did she ever pay those bills, to the tune of $30 million in today's money. But here's what nobody talks about. Gloria's childhood was absolutely brutal. Born into a military family that moved constantly, creating a rootless existence that'd fuel her desperate need for security and control later in life. Her first marriage to Wallace Beery was a nightmare. He became intoxicated on their wedding night and violated her trust completely. When she became pregnant, Beery allegedly gave her something to cause a miscarriage, an act of cruelty that haunted her forever. Think about that. This woman who'd earned $8 million between 1918 and 1929, that's over $150 million today, was basically running from trauma her entire life. But Gloria was nobody's victim for long. She didn't just act, she produced, she invested, she built. Her oil field in Bakersfield, California, that wasn't some lucky accident. She studied the industry, understood the market, made calculated risks that paid off huge. Her complex relationships with men stemmed from deep trauma. She married 6 times, always seeking men to dominate her. But as her daughter Michelle observed, men came into her life like machos, and they left like poodles sitting up for a biscuit. At only 5 feet 1 inch tall, she compensated for her diminutive stature with an outsized personality and relentless work ethic. When she passed away on April 4th, 1983, She left behind $10 million, about $30 million today. Not bad for a woman who started with nothing but talent and an absolutely unbreakable will to survive. Judy Garland, $40 million today, peak potential. Judy Garland should have been one of Hollywood's wealthiest stars. Instead, she became a cautionary tale of how the studio system could systematically destroy both talent and fortune, leaving one of America's most beloved entertainers financially devastated. Born Frances Ethel Gum, Garland was thrust onto stages at age 2.5 by her ambitious mother, who began giving her pills by age 10 to control her energy and sleep patterns. This wasn't stage mothering. This was systematic child exploitation that would destroy her life. At MGM, the abuse became institutionalized. Studio head Louis B. Mayer controlled every aspect of her life, forcing her to survive on chicken broth and coffee while taking up to 80 cigarettes a day. The pep pills and downers they gave her to maintain brutal working schedules created addictions that would plague her entire career. Despite this abuse, Garland generated massive wealth for everyone except herself. The Wizard of Oz alone made MGM millions. Her concert performances broke attendance records. Her Carnegie Hall album became a legendary bestseller. But here's the tragic reality. While Garland was earning substantial sums, the studio system and her addictions were systematically destroying her to manage or keep that wealth. MGM paid her well, then charged back every expense: medical bills, handlers, even the cost of her own addiction treatment. Financial experts estimate that during her peak years, Garland could have accumulated wealth equivalent to $40 million today. She had the talent, the draw, the earning power. What she didn't have was anyone protecting her interests or helping her build lasting financial security. Multiple divorces, constant medical expenses, and her inability to manage finances while battling severe addiction meant that despite earning millions, Garland died nearly broke. The woman who made Over the Rainbow, an eternal classic, couldn't find her own pot of gold. Garland's story exposes the dark side of Golden Age wealth. For every star who built an empire, there were others whose talent was extracted like a natural resource, leaving them with nothing but fame and heartbreak. When she died at 47 from an accidental overdose, using the same type of pills MGM had introduced her to as a teenager, Garland left behind a mountain of debt and a legacy that would earn millions for others. She'd been one of the most valuable entertainers in history, but the wealth went everywhere except to her. Her tragedy makes the success stories of our other stars even more remarkable, because not everyone who had the talent also had the business sense or support system to turn that talent into lasting wealth. The Golden Age Wealth Revolution. 19 stars. 19 completely different approaches to wealth. From Gloria Swanson's oil investments, to Gene Autry's baseball team, to Dina Merrill's billion-dollar inheritance. These legends understood something that most entertainers never figured out. Fame fades, but smart money grows forever. While we hear all the tragic stories about stars who lost everything, these 19 built empires that lasted generations. They diversified, they invested, they retained ownership, they thought like business leaders instead of just entertainers. Mary Pickford and Charlie Chaplin literally invented the artist-owned production company model. Gene Autry proved you could turn cowboy movies into a media empire. Elizabeth Taylor showed the world how to leverage celebrity into billion-dollar businesses. But here's what really amazes me. Most of these fortunes were built using strategies that any successful person today could learn from. Real estate, diversification, ownership over employment, long-term thinking over short-term spending. The Golden Age, stars we remember for their talent, should also be remembered for their financial genius. They weren't just great actors. They were great business people who happened to act. These 19 legends proved that true wealth isn't about how much you earn. It's about how smart you are with what you earn. Their strategies for building lasting fortunes can inspire anyone, whether you're an entertainer, entrepreneur, or just someone who wants to build generational wealth. By subscribing, you're joining a community that believes success isn't just about talent. It's about the intelligence to turn that talent into lasting prosperity. Hit subscribe if you're ready to learn from history's greatest wealth builders, because these Golden Age legends still have so much more to teach us.